for the final time in the 2023 season, welcome to Ohio Stadium, home of the Ohio State Buckeyes. Hosting today, the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Minnesota Golden Gophers Senior Day in the Horseshoe. At least one of those seniors is maybe or maybe not going to be playing in today's game. Joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, I guess let's start with that senior. Tommy Eichenberg will be walking, and then the question is, will he be running during the game? He is a little bit up in the air in terms of his status.
Yeah, listed as questionable on the availability report this week. I would be a little surprised if he doesn't at least walk out there in full uniform, unlike John Simon in 2012 with no pads. Like, I think Tommy Eichenberg, whether it's just one snap or 3 or 20, I expect him to play at least one snap in his final game in Ohio Stadium, even if it's Tommy, we're just going to run cover 2, and then you just run deep and then cover the deep middle type of thing, and then we'll pull you out, get you an ovation, something like that. I would be a little surprised if he doesn't play.
And I'm sure if you ask Tommy Eichenberg, hey, do you want to play? If it left up to him, it is not questionable. It is definite he will play. Of course, you got to kind of keep an eye on the bigger picture. Buckeyes obviously have to get through this game right now, as Michigan needs to get through their game in Maryland right now before you get to the game. But I think everything this week is being done with an eye towards next Saturday and not necessarily specifically towards this game. The other player who is questionable right now, quarterback Devin Brown. He was hurt at Purdue, got back, was healthy last week, and then got hurt in pregame warmups. Now he's back on the questionable list. I think, we had talked earlier in the week about the fact that the more you saw Devin Brown this week, the less likely it was that Devin Brown was going to be a big part of the game plan next week. What are you expecting in terms of Devin Brown today?
That would be interesting if they just hold him one more week, planning to use him next week, as that's just part of the game plan going into this one. But as Ryan Day said, in terms of whether or not he would play this week, he has to survive warm-ups first. We'll see how that goes for him. But I think more than just using him in the red zone package, I do think they would like him to throw the ball a little bit today if possible, just in case something happens with Kyle McCord. You've got to balance that. Do you want to hide him, or do you want him to get experience?
Yeah, and he has had limited experience this year, played the first couple games of the season, then didn't play a whole heck of a lot. Then they introduced that package, and he played, here and there, a couple series here and there, but not a whole heck of a lot. So I think if he's healthy enough to go, they're going to want to have him play, just because you want to knock some of that rust off. You want to get him a few more reps, even if it's just running the same stuff he's run before and not show anything else. I think if he really is questionable in a game time decision and they think he could probably go, I think, again, you probably see him at least a little bit, not a lot. But yeah, he is one play away, as we have said, one play away from it being the starting quarterback at Ohio State. And Kyle McCord has been not 100% for weeks and weeks and weeks. We'll see how heavily that left ankle is taped for Kyle McCord. He is on the available report.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
no matter when we do
7, 8,
this,
9, 10.
we could do this at 7 in the morning for an 8 p.m. game, and they will be testing the ref mic during this recording. So those are the two guys who are game time decisions. Mike Hall, defensive tackle. It felt like the way Ryan Day addressed it earlier in the week felt like, oh boy, this might be a real long-term thing. Later in the week, you sort of got some, indications that maybe Mike Hall was going to be okay. So I think I'm viewing this maybe potentially as more of a precautionary thing than an, oh boy, how long is this going to last thing.
That's exactly where I am, based on what we're hearing later in the week or earlier this week. But yeah, if there's any question right now, you've got enough without him, but you'd like to have him against Michigan for how they plan to attack that offensive line. And so if it's just a matter of you give him one more week and he's going to be 90-95%, you do that, and you don't want to make things worse by putting him out there this week. And it's not senior day for him. He may be gone, but it's not senior day for him. So you'll see him out there hopefully for the Buckeyes on next Saturday.
The other starter who's out this week, safety Lathan Ransom. That is not a surprise. That has been kind of openly discussed that is a don't expect him in the regular season, and maybe we haven't heard a definitive thing for if they get to Indianapolis. That might be a bowl game or potentially even longer than that. Really just kind of depends. So that is not a surprise. The other guys who are listed as out this week, wide receiver Keon Graves, who's missed the whole season. Safety Cam Martinez. He is out. He has been sort of a bit player at best this year. He is out for the week. Freshman defensive tackle Jason Moore, freshman defensive tackle Will Smith Jr. So really, in terms of guys who have played a meaningful number of snaps this year, it's really Brown and Eichenberg on the questionable list, Hall and Ransom on the out list. Looking at Mike Hall, I think I'm so interested in. Hey Tony, listen, they have to beat Minnesota first. Okay. Yeah, big game today. Really got to get through that game. Okay, let's set that aside. Now let's talk a little bit about Michigan. The way Michigan ran the ball against Penn State last week, 7 offensive linemen on the field at a time. It feels like Ohio State's not going to just be able to go 4-2-5 against that, that package. And you get the sense you're going to see that package next weekend. That makes having a Mike Hall, if you're going to have to play, potentially JT Tuimoloau, Tyleik Williams, Mike Hall, do you have Ty Hamilton there at the same time? Do you have Jack Sawyer in the same time? Do you have Kenyatta Jackson or Caden Curry? You're going to have to kind of mix and match. If you're going up against 7 offensive linemen, you're going to be playing a lot of snaps of defensive linemen. To me, that makes having Mike Hall and having everyone else in that rotation as healthy as possible maybe one of the most single critical things that can happen today for Ohio State.
Yeah, and with the way he plays, he's not a big defensive tackle. Listed at 285 or 280 pounds, something like that. He can. There's a potential for him to get overwhelmed in that game. So the ability to rotate, put him in there in the right situations, and then of course having him rest this week to get healthy for that week is going to be key. But he's almost against Michigan more of a situational guy, I think, in terms of the pass rushing aspect, just the creating havoc aspect. But if do they run some 3 defensive tackle looks, like a 5-2, something like that next week against them? I think you have to battle the fire with fire because you're going to see that. And when Michigan substitutes those guys, you can also match that up. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up those substitutions for sure.
Yeah, it feels like you're going to, Larry Johnson has been a 4-down guy for as long as Larry Johnson has been a defensive line guy, which has been a hot minute. But this is, you're not probably going to be able to hold up against 7 offensive linemen with 4 defensive linemen. That is probably not a winning equation for Ohio State. The other name I didn't mention there, obviously, Hero Kanu, who has gotten a much bigger role as this season has gone along. He might be a real significant player for them next week as well. Today's game, it feels like this is maybe going to play out somewhat like last week's game, at least sort of matchup-wise, looking at these two teams. Ohio State, this is not a great offense for Minnesota. This is a very good Ohio State defense. So I'm not expecting 24 points for the Gophers or anything like that. And this is a Minnesota secondary that's been a little bit shaky at times, and it feels like Ohio State might be able to take advantage of that. If I'm Ryan Day, I think I come out with largely the same game plan I did last week, which is get Marvin Harrison a couple touchdowns, get him out of the game. The ideal situation for Ohio State in this game to me is get a 3-score lead or 4-score lead in the case of last week before halftime. Get everyone out and make it Michigan week as early as humanly possible for your starters.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the Purdue or the Minnesota defense gave up like 350 yards rushing to Purdue last week, which I don't know the last time Purdue rushed for 350 yards in a game.
Might have involved Mike Allstott.
It might have. I was thinking Jim Coletto, but they were never that good back then. So they're also susceptible to the run, but I do think you're going to see them, Ohio State, come out throwing it. Obviously, you're going to get Travion Henderson involved a little bit, but this to me feels very much like last week's game plan. I don't even know that you need to change anything. Even though Minnesota watched that game, you're like, well, certainly they're not going to do the same thing. And Randy's like, you know what? Let's just do the same thing. Let's see how that goes. I don't know that it'll be 35-3 at half or anything like that, but I think Ohio State could do that. And what do you think in terms of? I don't think they need to force the action with Emeka Egbuka. I think you can let him lie in wait for another week before you start to go crazy with him.
I think he's maybe in the same boat as some of these other guys where you want to get him out there, maybe kind of the Devin Brown, but you got to get him out there, get him in the rhythm of the offense a little bit. You don't need a 150-yard game from Emeka Egbuka. They need to get him 3 catches on 5 targets and then get him out of the game. Because you don't, he's been off that availability report for a couple weeks now. I don't know that I'm 100% sure he's 100%. He may still be kind of working back from that injury, and that's, you need him next week. You don't necessarily need him this week. You want to get him out there, want to get him maybe into the flow of the offense a little bit. But I think job number 1 is get the win, and job number 2 is get everyone out of the game healthy so that you're going up to Michigan with as complete a team as you possibly can.
Yep, I have no other things to add because that is exactly correct, Tom. Just as we rehearsed, good job.
I'm gonna clip that right before we rehearsed, or just as we rehearsed, and that will be my new ringtone. So if you call me and you hear that clip,
I can give the number out if people would like it. I will tweet it out.
All right. Well, that's we are out of time. It is 8675
309.
Yes, not going to tell you the area code, but just dial all the area codes and dial that number. You will not be the first. Well, that will do it for us. We will be back after the game with a very, very special live post-game show. They generally run about 2 hours. I'm going to put the over-under on the amount of conversation at about Minnesota at 7.5 minutes. Tony, are you taking the over or the under?
I'm going to take the under. I'm sorry.
It feels like we will probably, as soon as my official view on this is that as soon as Ohio State gets a 3-score lead in the game before the Michigan game, it is officially Michigan week. I don't know that Ohio State's players and coaches will view that as exactly correct, but we'll see when they pull the starters out. Whenever they pull the starters out, whenever Kyle McCord leaves the field, if he leaves the field healthy and he leaves the field, that is probably the start of Michigan week spiritually for everyone on that Ohio State sideline. So we'll be back after the game to talk maybe just a little bit about the Gophers and a whole lot about the Wolverines, and one of the most anticipated games in the history of the greatest rivalry in all of sports. And that doesn't even feel like hyperbole.
No.
So we will be back after the game. Make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Make sure you are subscribed at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. It's a great place to support Tony and Kevin and I, and Mark covering recruiting, and Ross and Devin and Mickey covering the X's and O's and making you a smarter football fan. Also, one of an incredibly active community talking occasionally about Ohio State football, but a whole lot about Michigan recently as well. So you can find that all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it. We'll talk to you after the game.